Absolutely. So first, I'm excited about today. Thank you everybody for coming. Rosemarie, Dori, thank you so much for putting this together. Um, I know I reached out to both of you when we first started talking about this topic, and I just think that in light of everything that's going on, this is just a wonderful opportunity for all of us as professionals to learn from two very fantastic mediators, because you guys have built an arsenal of tools and weapons, and let's hear what works and doesn't work. So I really appreciate you guys taking so much time to put this together for all of us. Most of you know me. I am Sonia. I'm one of the co-founders of Divorceify, and I'm also a mom to a 10-month-old baby, so that is why I am in my living room sitting on the floor right now. But I showered and I put makeup on, so I'm ready. So I have just taken this opportunity with this whole pandemic to really promote amongst our community of professionals, as all of you have heard me say many times. I just want us to really learn from each other and really utilize the value that we have as professionals all together. So I have been connecting, collaborating, and learning from all of you, which is why I'm putting on these, well, I'm not putting it on. Our professionals are coming together to put on these webinars. I think it's as timely as it can be for us to really have a community and a community of professionals that we can tap into, not only for our own practices, but for our clients, because the influx of people looking for divorce information and seeking divorce services is up there and happening. So welcome, thank you, Rosemarie and Dori. I'm really grateful to both of you for this and everybody for taking the time today.
Thank you. Okay. So my name is Dori Shwirtz, and I'm an attorney, but I practice exclusively divorce mediation. And my company is called Divorce Harmony, and it's 100% online. We do all of the mediations virtually. So Rosemarie also, her business is also all online. So we thought it would be helpful just to discuss our practices and how we've been operating all these years online, since that's becoming more relevant in today's situation and what's going on with COVID. And more people are having to transfer their businesses to an online platform. I'm in Miami, by the way, and yeah.
So hi, everybody. I'm Rosemarie Ferrante, and I'm also an attorney who focuses solely on non-adversarial divorce, so mediation and collaborative. My office is in Connecticut, and I also offer online. I'm 100% online, and I've been offering it prior to COVID, but in the last month and a half, all of my clients are online, and all of my consultations are online. And so we're happy to share what we've learned along the way and what works. And interestingly, Dori and I have very different practices. So you'll hear a little bit about how I do things and how she does things, challenges we've had. And so what we were going to do is start just a little about mediation in general. But we are curious to know how many of you are actual mediators right now. You could just sort of raise your hand or. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little just about what mediation is, and why it makes sense, and why online mediation in particular makes sense. So mediation, with regard to divorces, is a very different process, obviously, than litigation, and it's a forward-looking process. It's interest-based and not position-based. So what does that mean? I'm sorry, as I look to the side, because I have to let people in who are still joining. So what that means is, in litigation, in the traditional adversarial divorce process, people want to tell their stories, people want to win, people, just by the nature of the adversarial process, it pits people against each other in a way that they're stating their positions for the court, they're gathering evidence. And the reason that Dori and I both focus on mediation is because we want to help families transition smoothly through the divorce process by looking at their interests, understanding what their goals are, helping them understand it's not about winning, it's about creating workable post-divorce life. And in mediation, they can do that. They can work on creative, personalized agreements that make the most sense for their family. And as most of us know, a family doesn't end after divorce. Sorry, I'm going to let somebody else in. Families are still families post-divorce, and particularly, obviously, if there are children, they need to coexist at worst, but at best thrive. So through the mediation process, which is a much more peaceful process, which puts the family at ease, the parents in a situation where there's less stress, it takes less time, it's more cost effective. Mediation is empowering because you're not having someone else tell you what decisions to make. You are making those decisions. Good mediators provide resources to help people make those good decisions. And that's part of the team-like approach that we're going to talk about a little bit. And so when you're making the decisions, you're buying into the agreement. So what we find is mediated agreements are more likely to be followed. They have higher compliance rates. And lastly, all of those things are what makes online mediation something that is a positive way to get through the divorce process. But in addition to all of those things, what online mediation also allows is the flexibility for people to be able to participate in the process from their own homes. And so that's something that both Dori and I have found people are very thankful for, to have that process in place where they can participate in the process from home without the added stress of going to somebody's office.
I would also add that, that going from home is very, it can be very, very helpful with the stressful situation. When you have to go even to a mediation in person, you have to get dressed and you have to get there, maybe fight through traffic, and you have to sit in the same room with someone that you maybe don't want to see. So to be able to just click on a button and to do it virtually can take away so much of that stress and already make the mediation proceed in a much more peaceful and less stressful way. And not having to deal with those little things that can add to it.
I was going to actually ask you, do you find that many of your clients who are still living together come to your online mediation sessions together? Or do you see them in separate rooms? Does it depend? Because most of my people
yeah. But most of mine are together just for practical purposes. So they only have to deal with getting online with one computer. But sometimes they're in separate rooms if they really just want to be not together. But usually they are. If they're in the same house, they're going to log on together.
And now we have, of course, the added issue of kids being home. So one of the things and one of the challenges with online mediation is just making sure that everybody understands certain parameters. And we will talk about online mediation agreements, but with everybody being at home together now, we really want to make sure that the adults are in a place where the children are not. And I tell my clients, we're going to time out. If anyone's child needs you, just, say, excuse me, and we'll just pause. We can put people in breakout rooms or whatever we need to do so that the children, are handled and they come first, but they certainly don't want to be listening in or hearing any of the conversation we're having.
I usually, nowadays, I think more people are accustomed, you kind of don't have to explain it now, with people who have already been on Zoom calls these past few months, so they're very aware of how it works. But previously, I would usually offer a free consultation. So I always offer to have that consultation on video conferencing, so we can practice and also they can see how it works and that they're comfortable with it before we actually go ahead with the mediation. So then, we can give them tips about how to use the camera, the microphone, where to go so they avoid the children, not to take any calls during the mediation. I know it sounds basic, but it gives them a sense of security, of knowing what to do, what steps to take before they go ahead with the mediation.
So do you want to talk, Dori, why don't we talk about a little bit about the, feeling stuck and what's happening in our various jurisdictions and why mediation makes most sense, especially with what's happening in the courts now.
Right. I think normally even it could be tough to get heard in front of a judge in pre-COVID times, but now the courts are backed up and your family doesn't stop for the situation. There are still conflicts that need to be resolved. And I think this is maybe an opportunity in disguise for more people to have to deal with the collaborative process, professionals and families, if they want to have any issues resolved, they need to do it for themselves now, really, and work together. So maybe it's something they weren't familiar with before, but it's more of a reality now with everything going on. And I think that it's not going to just magically go back to February 2020 anytime soon. There's going to be a big transition where there's going to be, we don't really know, but maybe people aren't going to be so comfortable to go to places where there's people. So I think it's going to be a slow process, and it's something we have to think about, that this is kind of going to be our new reality for a while, or at least some kind of version of it. So there's going to be more and more people operating online, virtually, with our what we do and other businesses also. So I would just say that I'm not technologically savvy at all, and my business is 100% online. So I think that even if you've been doing your business a certain way for however many years, it's possible for anyone to do this. I think the latest apps and things are great to have for your business, but I really think the most important thing when operating online is being able to maintain that personal connection that you have when you're with someone in person, and to really be able to reach out and touch that person through the screen, to make them feel heard and listened to. And it's a little bit more of a challenge than when you're in person because you're on the screen. And a good analogy would be for me now is my kids' teachers. They're all on Zoom till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, class after class. And the teachers, especially with my younger ones, are having to work overtime to really engage them and keep them involved. So I think it's kind of like that with mediation. You just need to work a little harder to establish and keep that connection with your clients, to keep everything going. But it is possible, and you really don't need to be a tech wizard to do any of that.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about the different tech that I use versus what Dori uses, because we do have our process a little bit different. But in terms of I took a look at all of your names, and we're all from various jurisdictions. In my jurisdiction right now, courts are only hearing emergency matters. And so people are not getting into court for their typical divorce proceedings. The nice thing is, even before all of this, with regard to mediated divorce, the only time we needed a court's involvement in Connecticut was for in-person hearings. So some of your jurisdictions may require that, some may not. Connecticut was always a little bit behind the ball in that regard, because many states took divorce papers, had finalized divorces on the papers. Now, because of COVID, the courts literally are just doing that. So as of yesterday, we just got instructions as to how to have those things done. As mediators, we face some issues in terms of filing. So since some of us who are mediators are attorneys, we're not attorneys of record. So we can't file on behalf of our clients. We need to walk them through the process. It's a little bit interesting in Connecticut because particularly now, certain courts are open, certain courts are closed. So ones that would have been heard in a certain judicial district are now being heard in another. So the really only option for people for finalizing their divorce once they've reached their agreement is by e-filing. And so we mediators have to walk people through that. You can't just go into court and file documents. So there have been some added wrinkles to the process, but in a lot of ways, this is smoothing the process in terms of just allowing people to have their divorces finalized without court appearances. Again, at least in my jurisdiction, but I would imagine it's similar in many of your jurisdictions. So, you know, the mediators, whether you're an attorney mediator or a mental health professional mediator, financial mediator, you need to make sure you really understand what's happening in your jurisdiction, because although we can continue to work with our clients via Zoom or Google Hangouts virtually and help them come to a final agreement, once they come to that final agreement, how does it get finalized?
I'll go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I'm just going to say also in this time of economic uncertainty, a lot of people that are thinking about divorce maybe can't afford the traditional route anymore, especially now. So the mediation, especially virtual mediation, gives them an alternative that's affordable in this economic climate.
So before we start to talk about our process from initial consultation to final agreement, we did want to just talk a little bit about mediation training. So if you are interested in being a mediator, we discussed before this that neither Connecticut nor Florida have any licensing for mediators. So anybody can be a mediator, which is a little frightening. That being said, there are a lot of organizations that have standards and ethics for mediators to abide by. So the APFM is a national organization, professional family mediators on a national level. Statewide, we have CCND, which is the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce, and it's an interdisciplinary association. So whether it's mental health professionals, financial professionals, or legal professionals, we all have different roles in the divorce process. And we all help families through the divorce process. But we have standards. And so it would be important for anyone who's contemplating being a mediator to really understand what those standards are, what the organizations are in your state. Dori, what is the organization in Florida? You'd mentioned it, I don't recall.
Oh, the Florida Academy of Professional Mediators is one. And then of course the NADP also, Association of Divorce Professionals, not just mediators, but anyone involved in the divorce process.
So when I start my consultations with people, I do it via Zoom. And prior to this, when I did it in person, my consultation's still the same. And in my consultation, I always talk to potential, and I speak to both parties at the same time. So I speak to potential clients about how they want to help their family transition through the process. And I talk to them about the 3 different legal processes, whether it's collaborative divorce, mediation, or traditional litigation, what the differences are, and the pros and cons of each. And I talk to people really about what is your, together you both need to make the decision of how you're going to bring your family through the process. And then individually, you both need support. So I talk to people a great deal about the different roles that are the different roles and the different professions that are available to help them through the process. And oftentimes, as a mediator, I tell them, I'm your last stop. Oftentimes, I see people in crisis mode. They're couples who are, ready to get divorced, but they don't know what that means. And they need to take a deep breath, because sometimes there's a lot of pre-work to get people ready for the mediation process. So that's where divorce coaches are important. That's where mental health professionals are important. That's where financial professionals are important, and even in the financial umbrella, there's mortgage bankers, there's realtors, there's appraisers. So I help people identify what their issues are, and I talk to them about the resources available to them, so that if ultimately they go through the mediation process, they're able to make informed, educated decisions. And that's my goal as a mediator, to really help people make informed, educated decisions. So it starts right at the consultation, where I talk about what their options are and what different support professionals are available to them.
I think that's important too, to make them feel comfortable that they're not giving up their rights by going to mediation. They have all those resources available and can still make informed decisions and have the help of all the different professionals that they would need.
Yeah. One of the things that Dori and I were talking about before too is the role of review counsel. And, it's a really delicate role, in my opinion, at least, in terms of a mediation. When we talk about challenges, we'll talk about that, because it's really important for people to understand what the role of review counsel is, and also for review counsel to understand what the role of review counsel is in a mediation. The role of review counsel is not to draft the agreement, to rewrite the agreement, to fire people up in the process. One of the challenges in my mediation practice is when people choose the wrong review. And so if after that initial consultation, people want to work with me and we proceed to work together, I have a consent to mediate agreement, and now it's updated for an online consent to mediate. And I really want people not only to read that, I want us to review it together, because there are guidelines. Mediation is a good faith process. It's voluntary. It's transparent. There's a respectful communication that has to happen. These are standards that it's difficult for many people in a dispute to come to, but even more difficult when you're in a vulnerable situation where you're going through a divorce, where emotions are high, and now you have to trust the person who perhaps betrayed you on some level. But in one of my first meetings after people review that agreement, I really talk to them about it so they understand what the process means and what it doesn't mean. I think a lot of people have misinformation about mediation. There was a TV show, I don't know if you guys remember this, it was a couple years ago. It's called, I want to say it was like Untying the Knot or something, but it was a mediator. And she was like an arbitrator. They presented their positions and the mediator said what was going to happen. Like, that's not mediation, but sometimes people think it is. So do you struggle with that at all, Dori? Like, do you do a consent to mediate agreement?
I do a letter of engagement where I explain all the terms of confidentiality, fees, and liability, and that is completely voluntary. But yeah, I struggle with trying to present myself as the objective third party, that I'm really not on team A or team B, because sometimes parties will have that view of me, even though I don't see where it's coming from. So I really struggle with that sometimes, to really present myself as just this neutral third party, but also acting interested in both parties and what they're going through. It's a balance.
Yeah.
And yeah. Do you have that as well?
Yeah, I do think it's a balance. We're certainly not here to judge the agreement, and I want people to think creatively about what works for their family. So, we do talk about judicial norms, but again, as attorney mediators, we can't give advice. but we can certainly give information. And a lot of mediators struggle with, what does that mean? And where is the line drawn? Well, we could talk about, what does the equitable distribution statute say? What are the factors? Review counsel is important because many people need that advice. I can't say you should be seeking alimony or you'd be crazy if you'd be paying it, but I can talk about what is the judicial norm in my jurisdiction for alimony in a situation such as theirs, once I've gotten to know them and know the facts and the background and the information.
That's a valuable tool, I think, to have that, to explain the guidelines, to give them something to fall back on and something to guide them making the decision. And that doesn't make you impartial. I mean, doesn't make you biased. You're just explaining what the guidelines are.
Absolutely. And in a normal situation, or in a hopefully typical situation where they have good review counsel who they can speak to, so by the way, maybe we should just touch on the fact that there's two different types of review counsel, or two different ways people can get the assistance from review counsel. I would say the lion's share of my clients anyway, wait until there's a draft agreement, and then they go and they talk to a review attorney who will review it with them, make sure they understand all of the different parts and provisions that they're agreeing to, their rights and responsibilities. So that's one way. The other way is what some people in my jurisdiction call consulting counsel, and they're attorneys who consult with and coach their client through the mediation process. I talk to people about these options, and they're obviously entitled to get whatever kind of review and other support they need so that they feel they're making informed decisions. I have to say, in all of my years of doing mediation, the very few times that they've broken down was when there was a review attorney who just stirred the pot and didn't want their client to do something that the family thought was a creative solution, but it maybe fell outside of judicial norms. At the end of the day, a judge has to approve it. But I don't typically find that judges in my jurisdiction don't approve agreements if they're creative or unusual, as long as the people are doing it with their eyes open. Somebody has just made a comment. Carrie, thank you. She said she usually sends each party a list of review counsel, and it includes attorneys that she knows are mediation friendly and not likely to inflame the situation. So similar to what I do as well. Should we talk about, Dori, the next step then, in terms of how we do these things online? How do we get clients to sign documents? How do we get paid? Do we do calendar scheduling online and things like that? Do you want us to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I actually use Google Hangouts for my video conferencing. I just started out with that because I do G Suite through Google, and I find it works fine. It's included with G Suite, so I don't have to pay anything. That's really why I did it, and I haven't had any problems with it. It works great. And there are obviously times when there are technical difficulties, and one of the clients can't get on. So what do you do? I think we've all probably had this in the last few months anyway, with Zoom calls, things not working. You just wing it. I usually will just have a telephone call instead with the mediation, and it's totally fine. And if the mediation's not over, we try to fix the problem. So the next session we can do online, but it's really been fine. I think it's comparable to Zoom, and it's very easy for the clients to use. As far as payment, I use Square. It's very, very simple. I just send invoices through email, and it works great for me. Let me see that. I know I don't record the video mediations.
No, and actually it's part of my agreement that nobody will record them. They're confidential.
Right, yeah, you don't want to have a recording of it. I know that Rosemarie does things differently, but I have a flat fee. I don't use a retainer. So my flat fee includes a certain number of hours of mediation. It includes drafting of the documents, e-filing, and it also includes the court's filing fee to give them incentive to do the flat fee. And then if they go over the number of hours, they're charged an hourly fee after that. You do something different, right, Rosemary? You
I
have
do. Yeah, I do a retainer upfront and monthly bills. I use LawPay and not Square. It links right to my billing software, so that's really nice and easy. I'll tell you, one of the challenges I've had is when I met people in person for consultations, I always gave them a folder with some documents that they would fill out and send back to me if they wanted to proceed. The retainer letter I always did after if they told me they wanted to proceed, but like client information sheet or their financial affidavit worksheet. Now I have to have people do that online. I use DocuSign for signing the consent to mediate and the retainer letter. And I use fillable PDFs for the other forms. People have a very hard time with this, and I don't understand why. So I've offered, to walk them through it just on a Zoom call. DocuSign makes people crazy, and I would love to hear if somebody uses anything else, because I really found it very simple and easy to use. But I'm hearing from a lot, I get a lot of emails, oh, we can't figure out how to sign this, or how do we use this fillable form? And so that's actually been an interesting challenge for me with just making, helping people with the technology.
I don't know if you use, but I use this, it's called JotForm. It's a free form filler. It's very simple, just to get basic information from the clients, and I haven't had any complaints with it. And then it's emailed to you, their form that they fill out. Jennifer asked how many hours. So if it's with children, it's 5 hours are included, and without, 4 hours in my packages.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I think that was the in terms of the technology, it was Zoom versus Google Hangout, what we use for retainer letters or consents to mediate, how people sign. The one other interesting little challenge that we've been having is just when people are ready to sign their final agreement, many of the documents for the court have to get notarized. My jurisdiction now allows for remote notarization. And I think most probably do now, but that was just a little bit of a learning curve for myself, because we have to tape it and keep it for 10 years, which seems just crazy, but it is what it is. So, we're just figuring it out. So I think all of us have to just be a couple of steps ahead of learning these things so that we can guide our clients through it. And it's, any challenges in terms of technology are easily overcome. Things happen. We all know with Zoom calls, things happen. Literally, Hollis is here. She knows this. My kid's bird flew on my head in the middle of a mediation. It was ridiculous. So, things happen, and you just have to kind of laugh at it. And technology, sometimes Wi-Fi isn't working. People get stuck mid-sentence. It is a good idea to know prior to, if you're using Zoom, I'm not sure how this works on Google, if the people are attending together or not, because sometimes you just see one participant's name waiting in the waiting room, and they both might be together. So those are just a couple of little tips I've learned along the way.
right.
Should we open it to, oh, somebody said they use Adobe for e-signatures. Okay. That's good to know. Should we open it to questions? Conversation?
This is Rosalind Sadak. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I was wondering whether you put any material on the screen ever. Obviously, they have documents in front of them, but if you're doing a parenting plan and you want to address a certain paragraph, do you ever bring material on the screen, and how do you do that efficiently?
I do, for sure. And so on Zoom, it's a simple screen share, and it's actually really nice. I think it's almost one of the benefits of a Zoom call as opposed to in person. In person, I did a lot of things on the whiteboard. And so now people can really, if it's right in front of you on your screen, for example, a financial affidavit, instead of everybody flipping pages and looking, I can show them exactly where we are. Same with edited documents. If I do a draft agreement, then we can share the screen. We can go through it line by line, make changes as we go. So that's been really, really nice.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Dee Dee. How are
Dee
you? So I know you mentioned, and also I have had clients in mediation, and you go in with a certain mutual respect, and that's why I chose mediation. What happens when that respect is lost along the way? If something happens in the 4th, 5th meeting and someone's hiding money, or something happens that you realize this is not going to be a respectful situation, how do you handle that?
That happened several times.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes with the mediations, I've had a lot of clients that drink, and either they come to the virtual mediation intoxicated, or you can tell they're drinking while because it's easy to do that when you're online. Nobody knows what you're doing. So things can get escalated, and just have to kind of be aware, maybe that's what's going on and that's why it's escalating. And if there is a situation where you feel like it's getting like that, I'll cut the session short if it's all 3 of us, and maybe caucus and have one-on-ones and try to get back to a better place with everyone. Just have to be sensitive and know that things could be going on that we can't see online. And really, really be aware of that and try to bring everybody back together. A lot of emails, sometimes text, phone calls, and really communicating with everyone to get everybody back on track.
Yeah. And I think that happens whether it was online mediation or not. That's just sort of a challenge of mediation. I've had situations where I have to bring people back to their agreement, their consent to mediate agreement, and really talk about these were the rules, these were the guidelines. We're veering away from it. Listen, we all know divorce is difficult. So mediation attracts people who at least have the desire to move smoothly through the process with a level of respect. But, it's so easy. And it's actually interesting in collaboratives that I've had. It's nice when there's another attorney there as well to kind of help bring it back. Because it can easily veer off with emotions. So,
and then it's easy for them to hide too, because we're online.
Right.
They don't have to call you back, or they don't have to engage if they don't want to. They can kind of hide behind it's virtual. So you really have to work hard to get them back into it.
You know what I find interestingly, and this is an interesting thing that I noticed. When there's only 3 people on the screen, you're really seeing facial expressions in a way that sometimes you're not seeing in person. So it's so easy for me when one person's speaking to see the other person sort of doing this thing, or like yawning, or just like rolling their eyes. I somehow find that it's almost more exaggerated. And so I see it, and not that I necessarily call people on it, but I can easily say, I noticed that made you uncomfortable. What are your thoughts? So it almost exaggerates. Do you find that, Dori? Sometimes some of the facial expressions are exaggerated on screen when you're not in person across the.
Yeah, for sure. You can have a better sense of someone, how they're feeling, because you're just focused on their face, and that's the only thing that you're seeing. So it is magnified rather than if you were in a room together. So
do you do online scheduling, Dori, or do you do it all via just just email, or when you're in contact?
I offer both through my website. You can schedule either.
Got me took her to bed the other night by a very loud sound.
What?
I don't know where that was coming from.
Yeah, so either directly through with the client, or they have the option to schedule it online. Is that how you do it as well?
I just do, I do it individually. I've tried to use like Calendly, I think is how you say it. It's just difficult for me to stay on top of that because if my entire calendar is not integrated, you know, I may on my own decide, well, Friday I'd need that time period off. I don't have to update it. So I rather people just email me and just schedule that way.
It does take an effort. I do it through Square, so it takes an effort to make sure that
Mm,
those availabilities are when I'll actually be available.
right.
So yeah.
Somebody did ask before we started today, where are most of your referrals from? I would say most of my referrals are people find me online, certainly prior clients, and professionals. And so professional networking, especially if you're building your mediation practice, is so important through groups like this, through Divorceify, through various organizations that are interdisciplinary. I found as a lawyer, I knew all the lawyers. I used to litigate in my old life, and lawyers are not sending lawyers' cases. You know, you need to really be networking with the mental health professionals, the divorce coaches, the financial professionals, many of whom I co-mediate with as well, one of whom's on the call today. And so, you know, you establish relationships with like-minded professionals, and you certainly don't want to be sending any of your clients to professionals who you don't trust, who you wouldn't want to work with if it was your sister's divorce or your own divorce. So I find those relationships are so important to me. And I invested a lot of time in my early days of building my own practice in really getting to know those professionals on a one-on-one basis. And I still do because I think it's important.
Right. And I would say that since we do have virtual practices, the social media presence and just the online presence is crucial because potential clients will look at that, your activity online, and judge whether or not they look at you as someone that's qualified. You know, I'm in Miami, but I have clients from all over the state, some that have probably never heard of me. They just see me online. So it's important for me to keep that online presence active, you know, by contributing to blog posts or just Instagram, and also, like you said, being involved in professional organizations to connect with professionals from all over the world. So that's really important as well. And I get my business, I would say 50% from referrals from past clients and other professionals, but then the other 50% from Google Ads, which is something that I utilize a lot. And I also employ I know nothing about it, but I know it's important, SEO. I have a company that helps me with that because my ultimate goal is to be found organically through organic searches and not through Google Ads. That's really important. So that company helps me with that, with blog posts and keywords and things like that.
You know, it's so funny because I'm sorry, Rosalind, I just wanted to say one thing quickly. Dori and I were connected on social media before we actually met virtually. And I knew of her company and she knew of my company. But she had brought up Google Ads, and I said, and I've never used Google Ads. And I just went back to Google this morning based on what she was telling me. And I Googled online divorce mediation, and I'm not up at the top anymore. It just goes to show, like right now, so many more people are doing this. And so we really need to be on top of those things because, you know, there's a reason why meetings like this are popular because it's needed. And I'm thrilled that the public is starting to understand what mediation is and see it as a viable option. But for sure, there's a lot more competition. So we need to be on top of those things for sure.
This is Rosalind. I'm founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and we're national and international in scope. And I invite you all to participate, I have a page on Facebook called Child Centered Divorce Network. So if you post and contribute and answer questions and things like that, you're more than welcome to do that. And on LinkedIn, we have a group, Child Centered Divorce Network, and there's more than 3,000 members there. So it's another outlet for you. We highly endorse mediation and collaborative divorce. That's where I try to get most of our families to focus, because it's definitely the way to protect the children in the best possible way. So we're more than happy to promote your efforts. I was just curious, as both of you, whether you're online, but does that mean you're only working within your state to do mediation, or are you able to do that around the country?
I do a majority of in-state. Occasionally I'll do mediation, but I won't do the paperwork for out-of-state cases. But I try to focus on Florida.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, the same. So, you know, a lot of mediators who are not attorneys do what then attorneys who are not admitted in other states can do. So we can certainly mediate anywhere. It's just a matter of having good professionals in those states who will be drafting attorneys and understanding the differences in whatever the nuances are. So for sure, changes and differences.
Okay.
Question and comment, which is why, going back to what you were saying, Rosemary, the whole professional network is so important, especially in out of state as well. I have a quick question. So I love the fact that both of you in the beginning, in the very first session, explain to the client that the different professionals just because I felt as a divorce litigator that when a client hit me, they thought I hit the jackpot. She's going to be my realtor, financial advisor, therapist, perhaps dog walker, who knows? So I'm just curious, is that effective? Do clients really, hearing that in the very beginning and understanding the key players, does that really help them understand that this is a team approach and to utilize these professionals accordingly?
I'll answer. I think so, for sure. And by the way, it makes my job easier. So, you know, I was talking about sometimes in an initial consultation, I have people in crisis mode. I talk to them about discernment counseling and what that means and whether that's appropriate in their situation. I will tell you that so many of the people who I talk to about that, I either never see again, so perhaps they have found another mediator, but I like to think that they stayed married. Or they come back to me, and I have to say those are some of the healthiest mediated divorces that I've had, because you need to do that work. You need to do that mental health work. You need to do the financial work. You know, we all know what we know and hopefully know what we don't know. And so while I can certainly do affidavits and guide people through the financial decisions they have to make, if there's complex tax issues or trusts or business valuations, I'm not going to do their business valuation. And so the more they understand this, the easier it is for them to make decisions. And again, my goal is good decisions for a durable agreement that is flexible in terms of particularly the children, but that's durable and is going to be enforceable. So I think that's for my clients.
Perfect. Thank you.
I
I have
agree.
a question. My concern always with mediation is if there aren't attorneys involved representing them, is that there's usually a power on one side and no power on the other. And it's not your role necessarily to be a referee and rebalance that. So how do you deal with that?
Well,
Can I answer that question?
yeah.
Yeah, because I have that a lot. Sean Masterson, I'm an attorney mediator based out of Providence, licensed in Connecticut, Rosemary, but I don't do any divorce work in Connecticut. I stress whenever I'm doing a mediation that although I'm an attorney, I'm not their attorney. And that any time, you know, after first session, second session, they can stop in the middle and say, no, I need to go to an attorney to discuss this. And that has to be in all the informed consent. They sign off on it because, you sometimes can know that, Gary, you know, when you're there with them, who's driving the boat.
Right.
Sometimes you don't. It seems like there's an agreement, and then after the fact, someone comes to you, one of the parties comes to you and says, gee, I only agreed that because I was afraid what was going to happen on the ride home. Okay? So I think it's important to stress that they, at every step, can go to an independent counsel to review whether it's a question on valuation, it's a question on alimony. Support's pretty easy, child support, because it's dictated by statute, right? There's not much leeway there. But that's how I deal with it. And I'm very cautious about that because although I'm an attorney, I don't want to get in trouble for giving legal advice and having, an ethical dilemma because I can't represent both sides on opposite parties. So I more to protect myself than to them, but always stress that.
Right. Well, candidly, that's one of the issues why I've stayed away from doing mediations myself. I don't do them. And just as a side note, I'm in Michigan, Farmington Hills, just outside of Detroit. And so that's always been a problem. I've had many clients come to me after they tried to get it resolved on their own. And I just see the power disparity. And my experience has been once my client, who's typically the person who doesn't have the power in the relationship, it makes it that much more difficult when it turns into litigation. So I'm just curious how people deal with that, that issue.
I'll also just add to that, though. I don't allow people to make decisions in the mediation, in the sessions, especially if it's something, and I guess I shouldn't say don't allow, but if there is conversation, and clearly as a mediator, you see who's trying to do that anyway. I say, this is what we're going to talk about. I do summaries. This is what you were both speaking about. Talk to your review counsel about it. I mean, until they're signed, there's no deal, right? So all of the negotiation is they're responsible for negotiating on their own behalf. I don't find there's a huge power struggle in the majority of my cases. When there are, I do more than just encourage review counsel. I strongly encourage it to the point where, I certainly can't require it. But, I guess my point is when it's clear that there's something like that happening, I'm not just accepting like, okay, everybody said yes, let me draft the agreement right away. It's just not part of the mediation process. It's not how it works.
I agree. I think that I make it clear to my clients that in mediation, everything that goes on is completely voluntary. No one's holding a gun to their head. They don't have to agree. And they're empowered to make their own decisions. And if there is that power struggle, if you do sense it, then yeah, I also strongly advise them to have a third party review everything. But I do think that in the majority of my clients are completely capable to make their own decisions and be comfortable with the decision that they make.
One other thing I just want to add on that too is when it's financial, that's when CDFAs are so important because often in my area we see typically it's women, and these are typically in long-term marriages, who are, may not have understood all the finances. There might be private equity, there might be things that are difficult for a lot of people to understand. So I talk to them in the early stages about having a CDFA involved. The husband, by the way, in these situations where it is the husband, typically likes that idea because it helps the process. If the wife understands the issues and has a CDFA helping her understand the finances, I have found it's a much smoother mediation process. Oftentimes I've worked with financial professionals whose purpose is, although neutral, to help one spouse get up to speed with the decisions. Did that make sense?
Yeah. I'm also curious if you've got two people in front of you, do you find they are typically engaged? I haven't had the opportunity to do an online mediation or video mediation yet. I've been able to kick them all into May. So I have several that are coming, and I'm concerned you know, obviously they're not two parties, a husband and wife meeting with the mediator, but I'm going to be involved. So there's going to be 5 different screens. I'm concerned, and I'm concerned about it for myself, that I'm not going to be as engaged because I'm not going to have that one-to-one. I'm not going to have the nonverbal communication. I'm not going to be able to show any passion or emotion. It's to me, it feels somewhat sterile. And I understand what you're talking about is engaging the client in being able to show. You get a little more theatrical, you know, in the 2-inch box that we have here. I'm just curious how you deal with that issue of keeping people engaged.
It's a learning curve. You have to just, I think, get used to it. And once you've done a few, I think it just comes more naturally. I know it's strange at first if you've never done it.
Right.
You're used to being in the room with someone, and it's what you've always done. But it's just a different. It's hard to explain. You really have to just do it. But it's like I said, just getting yourself out there. You don't have to be theatrical. You just have to be authentic. You don't need to have jazz hands and, you know, really make yourself shine. You just have to be your authentic self and do what you would do in the room, in person. But just make sure that your client knows that you're there and that you're working for them. And be just more attuned to what's going on with everyone else. Just keep an extra sensor out there.
Right. Well, the one draw that I got earlier was practicing with the client. And I can communicate with them and talk about it, but try to have some interaction, because that's something that I think is something I can use powerfully with a client. Is I can have that direct eye contact, and I can have it in closer than a 6-foot range, and they'll understand exactly what I'm saying, as opposed to just hearing it like it's in a movie and it's not as real.
Yeah,
Are you talking about a mediation and it's you and your client and another attorney and?
Yes.
Okay, and then a mediator.
And
so
I know you've kind of been focusing on
yeah,
just with the 2 individuals, and that was my listening coming into this, but I'm trying to translate that out into 5 parties.
I have found from what I hear from other mediators who do a lot of that, and I don't, I'm typically just with the clients together, that they use breakout rooms, and I don't know if they'll be using Zoom, but there's different ways, even within Zoom or whatever the technologies you're using, for you to have those private times with your client as well. I'm sure you're aware or learning about that too.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
We lose Sonia?
I'm here.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? I don't see any other questions off on this.
I have one other question. I got all kinds of questions. So let's say there's no lawyers that are involved, you know, directly. Would you ever have a support person of some sort in that mediation that's not an attorney?
I don't.
I wouldn't. No.
I mean, I kind of know the answer. I know the technical answer is no, but sometimes that's the person that they can look to. That might be that CDFA or even a mental health person, you know, especially if you're doing it all remotely.
Okay, so in that instance, yes, I would have a CDFA involved. I thought you meant just sort of like a support person, like a friend or a family member.
I kind of meant everything, but that's okay.
I have done it, and you know, many people co-mediate too. And so if there are, if it's a high conflict parenting situation, many mediators have mental health professionals come in and co-mediate with them. Certainly in complex financial issues, I've not done that. I have co-mediated with financial professionals, and also sometimes just have the financial professional in the room if both parties agree, even if that person's role, if that CDFA's role is to, again, get somebody up to speed. It's helpful because if, you know, whichever party needs the information, can ask them during the meeting. So it is efficient. It just has to be, as far as I'm concerned, as long as both parties are okay with it, then I'm okay with it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. Dori, was there anything that we missed that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was just very, very informative and so much good advice and information. So thank you. The comments are coming in. I'm seeing my emails pop up. So thank you very much to both of you. And thanks for all of the questions. I learned a ton, and this was the point. So thank you.
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to even send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to chat. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. This was
We are gonna share this recording, right, Rosemary and Dori?
Sure.
Excellent. So for a lot of people, if others are asking or whatnot, I'm gonna be sending out an email. I am in that. You're gonna have Dori and Rosemary's information, their companies, this recording, and anything else I wanna add in there, but it won't be too much. Thank you to both of you very much. This was extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.